Away, right. Okay, so yes, I'm Aubrey Stearn. I'm the head of DevOps. I should check this thing works. Actually going to be the former head of DevOps at Arcadia Group from Friday. So if anyone needs a really skilled contractor. So what my dad taught me about ChatOps. Probably one of my favorite talks that I give. It sounds like it should be a Rainbow Six game or something on the Xbox, but it's not really like that. ChatOps makes me think about the, I guess, monolithic shift in IDEs from something like Visual Studio to when I started working with Node and open source, and I got basically like a glorified text pad, and I kind of lost all my things that used to help me. It's quite simple. I guess if anyone here has come from the Windows world and gone to Nix, then you'll know that you've probably gone from like IDE and GUI-based tooling to Bash and command line, and it's reminiscent of that. It's very fast. I think of it as sort of ephemeral. So when I need to solve a problem, I tend to turn to ChatOps to do it. It's very quick for me to go and roll this stuff out, easy to onboard people who work in my team. When I hire engineers, I tend to hire ex-developers or current developers rather than traditional ops people, because I guess so much more of DevOps space sits in development than it does in traditional operations these days. It's faster and cheaper and easier to implement than everything else out there like usual. You can use almost any chat client you can probably imagine. I haven't used Spark yet, but I believe it works. The 10,000-foot view of ChatOps is real-time execution of tooling and workflow with simultaneous collaboration and extreme transparency. What's really cool about this is that when I'm executing commands, and this is particularly like it's quite useful when you're doing K8s or Kubernetes, you can go and run this stuff through chat. It means that your peers are watching you, which is really cool. So often I hear these stories about people wiping out 28,000 containers in production because they run the wrong command, and they tested it on pre-production, they ran to a meeting and executed it, and then it all blew up. But if we did this stuff in ChatOps, it means that our peers are able to review this stuff and say, hey, I think you're making a mistake. Maybe this is the wrong thing to go and do. So it's an interesting workflow to try and integrate. My other motivation is that before I transitioned, I used to carry this with me, which is an Oakley kitchen sink bag, which is really great. You can take everything in this thing everywhere. And then obviously I got more concerned with what I was my appearance and what I was taking with me, and I had to go and carry one of these, and I could carry less with me. I gave up my soul and moved from a 15-inch MacBook to a 13, which really hurts to this day. So I had a lot of motivation to think about how to minimize the amount of kit that I carried with me at any one time. My dad told me this story once about this guy in Birmingham who came up with his own martial art, and he was the guy who did like taekwondo, which is crazy kicks and whatnot. And he said, essentially, if you can't do it in a phone box, you can't do it in a pub fight, which is a very Birmingham thing to say. We love a good fight down there. And it kind of reminds me of that, like how do I reduce the tooling and the equipment and the stuff that I need to be able to go and fit this and bring this with me at all times? And ChatOps is a really great way of doing that. So knowledge is inherently perpetuated. I find this really cool because when you're using ChatOps, when you execute this stuff, you almost inherently have an audit trail that follows you, so people can go and review what happened. It's really good to wake up from a night of alerts or on-call and be able to see what something happened, so I'm able to replay the incident and look at how people dealt with stuff, the commands that were run, was it the right thing, was it the wrong thing, or I can go and look at some of the things that people executed, did they make the right decision? It's also useful because when other people come in from new teams, or I hire new members of the team, or even when we get like a new product owner, people are able to watch us execute these commands and generally see container roles from maybe canary to production, and they're able to look at that and go, oh, well, that's how I go and do a release now. And so they'll start learning just by watching the chat, which is really great because obviously learning and teaching people takes a huge amount of our time. Stuff to build. User timeline. So this is a cool story about a chap that I recently hired called Matt, and when Matt joined our team, the first thing I do is take that new person and we do some dev together, and usually we do it on the bot because there's a nice easy introduction to how we work, and generally I work in JavaScript environments, so it's a little bit of Node.js, and we'll work through that and we'll build something together. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to be able to expose the user journey on the website? So we've just started doing some work at Arcadia to do with open tracing, and we've gone on this maturity journey to figure out how we started to break things down to microservices, and when we start to do that, we start to look at, okay, how do we correlate stuff? And we have several stacks, so we need a correlation ID that sits over all the stacks that we can go and follow through. So we have this trace ID now, and it sits on the front of the website, and everybody who uses the website gets this trace ID. And we said, okay, how do we present this in a really cool way to people that don't usually have access to our tooling, who don't have AWS, who are product owners? How do we give them access to this? So we started off with the chats client and the bot and Elasticsearch. Elastic is obviously where we go and restore all of our logging for pretty much every microservice in our organization. So we would take the trace ID that you would get generally when you hit the website and pass it to the bot. The bot would then go and form a query and pass it on to Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch would go and pull back everything related to that trace ID. We would then go and use handlebars, HTML, and a CSS template, which I stole because I can't do CSS anymore. So I nicked somebody's really cool timeline. I then go and pass that into Puppeteer, which is headless Chrome, which means it's really easy to go and render. So we have a piece of HTML with CSS. We then go and render that, take a screenshot using Puppeteer, and save that to Amazon Web Services. And then we go and pull ourselves the secure S3 link back and pass that to the bot. And what that looks like when we run it, I will do a live demo. I'm cheating on this one, I promise. So we'll go and run this one. I need to see the screen. So we'll find the trace ID, and this is one that we pulled from the website. And then that's gone on away and queried Elastic, pulled something back. We've generated some HTML, saved it to S3, pulled back that secure link, and then we render it. It looks something like this. And that's pretty much the flow of a user, just using some random timeline thing that I built. But it's a really cool piece of ephemeral tooling, and this is something that actually took less than a day for us to create with a new person who'd never done this before, and it's really, really straightforward, just ephemeral stuff. And we pushed this out, and we said, hey, to the team, hey, by the way, we wrote this really cool thing, and they started to extend it almost immediately and add stuff that was more valuable to them. So it was a really nice thing to go through. Alerts pipeline. So I used to use the bot quite heavily for alerting and monitoring. In hindsight, this probably isn't the best thing to go and do, but I'll take you through the journey anyway. So the same principle applies. Elasticsearch is your repository of logging. You need to be quite good on your hygiene when it comes to logging. So let me ask you what a level 50 is or what a 500 is for you. An error for us is when somebody can't order something from the website. So that is the point where we'll log an error. Not just when something bad happens, it will have to be something where somebody can't order. That's the point where we want to say, hey, we need to react to this. We need to go and do something about it. So for anything else, it's a warning. If you'll find warnings in our code, they're generally deprecated errors where we decide that we actually can't do anything about it, or maybe they're just BAU-related errors that just exist, and so we put them there really for volume measuring. But if we raise a 50, we expect somebody to react to this. And so what we would do is generally go and query Elasticsearch every 1 minute and say, hey, go and bring me back all the level 50s in here and push them into the pipeline. So yeah, what is your level 50? Your hygiene, and this is something that I talk quite a lot in the dev teams about. When we do CI and CD, when we introduce those concepts to dev, so much of what we do is PR and hand-holding and working with those guys and making it okay to go through this process. So you think about you pushing stuff to Canary and pushing code. How high does the level of hygiene have to be in the development space? How much code do you have to go and test? If you're testing 100%, it's probably about 60% of where you really need to be. Do you have synthetic tests to go and tell you if you've broken something in production? If you're affecting 100 users, is the business signed up to that level of risk? And so what we're constantly doing is saying, sure, we go and deliver pipelines, we go and deliver CI, CD, but so much of that journey sits in the development space, so we're empowered to go and work in that space. So you go through this experience of saying, is your logging right? Is our hygiene at the right level? And so this piece of code looks something like this. So we poll for errors, and we'll push something into the pipeline. So I did loads of cool animations, but I can never remember where I put them. So there we go. The error comes in, and we'll do that time check, and it's on every minute. And so what you do in the last part of that check is to go and pull all the events, pull the last time code, and then go and say everything from that time code onto the next 60 seconds, pull on the next call to Elastic. And so we'll push that through the pipeline. The first thing it does is go to auto triage. So auto triage is something that I find really useful when you have historical errors in the organization. So while you've been there for maybe a couple of years or 6 months and you know what they are, when new people join, they don't know what your errors are and they're like, oh my God, something's going on alerts. So it's really useful to have auto triage go and annotate them with a little bit of meta just to say, this is what that error means. And then the next thing they'll do is hit auto action. So what can I do about this error? I'm raising a level 50. I must be able to do something about it at this point. So it's how can I go and apply some quick things that I can pretty much press when I'm in the pub drunk on my phone and I need to, it's really hard to copy trace ID, so we try and put that stuff into buttons. And then we go and do auto stats. So auto stats is quite useful when you have to measure the frequency of something. Now, you can do this pretty much anywhere, but I find it quite useful in chat to say, okay, something really bad's happening, the volume of this has gone up. I've had a horrible night when half of the BT network dropped for Pizza Hut, and we lost half of the huts, and Christ, everything blew up, and it was really good to see the stats and say, okay, things are tailing off, and we could still do this by phone without having to jump into AWS and go, oh, the network's back. It was easy enough to watch. And then off it goes, and the bot will go and say something. Off you go, error. And what that looks like is this. So we have the auto actions there, and actually you can see that auto actions is probably out of order with the buttons. That's because there's no guarantee when you're sending messages that they're going to end up in the right order. So sometimes you have to figure out about the way that you make this contextually fit. If you're doing pipelines, you might need to add a little bit of a weight to make sure it goes in at the right time, or figure out a way to structure it so it makes sense. But for us, it was just a quick piece of work. So that's our auto actions. We have the error that we've gone and pulled from the production website, formatted with Bunyan. Auto context, it says this error is going to occur when the cookie becomes invalid during checkout. So this is something we already know. It's something that infrequently occurs. It's a bit of an edge case. It's just to give us a hint to say that we need to go and fix this. And then we can go and open the event in Kibana, which is probably where you first start to go and diagnose this stuff. And then we can also go and replay the journey. So we have the trace ID, and if you're using anything on the site that lets you go and view the user journey, which we do, we're able to go and open that directly and run the trace and then go and pull that user journey back, and we can do that on our phone. And this thing takes seconds now. So we've taken generally things that used to take a very long time to diagnose, whipped them up into a really quick piece of ephemeral tooling that's taken a day to build, and then suddenly shaved so much time off the overall flow for everybody in the development team and in our entire department, I guess. When you only care about failure, use the bot. So another story, Node JSP, when I'm working with Node, I guess we start to think of security a lot more in our flow in DevOps. So I don't know which way you put the security around, but DevSecOps or SecDevOps, security has to come into it somewhere. And if you're working with Node, you're going to have this thing of outdated packages. You're also going to have vulnerabilities in your packages. So one way to go and solve this is with NSP. And if you Google it, you'll find Ninja's X Party, which is not what I'm talking about. I actually mean the Node security platform. And if you look at the Node security platform, they'll go and send alerts to your Slack channel. And if you go and do that, you'll find that they send you successes and failures. And what I really don't care about is successes. I don't care if something works. I really don't want to know about it. It's a lot like what we do. No one gives a crap if we do a good job. They only care when the world is burning down. So I want to go and filter out all the successes, and I want to only show the failures. And so, again, this was something that took me probably 20 minutes to just hack in, was to go and take the payload I was getting sent by Node Security, filter out the successes, and then go and push them onto the bot. So just like a little hop, but it was something that was quite useful, and it worked. Common pitfalls when you're working with bots, things that always come up. So, oh my God, let's integrate everything ever. So the first thing someone's going to go and do when you get ChatOps or a chat or something is to go and integrate Jenkins, GitHub, Circle. If it has notifications, you name it, somebody will add it to a channel, and they will usually add it to the development channel, which is really annoying. And then you'll find like 3 weeks later that everyone's so pissed off with all these notifications that you have this new channel called Dev. And almost everybody has this channel full of notifications and the one where they really chat about development stuff. So it's always really good to think about what you should be integrating into your platform, which channels you should do it on, where it provides value, and if it's not providing value anymore, back it out, do something else, rethink about it. Syntax chaos. Everybody talks differently. When I've seen people acknowledge commands, they say yes, yeah, yup, yeah, any why, any number of variations. Botkit refers to these as utterances. There are other frameworks, of course, but there's at least BotKit comes with a set that you can go and use and say, these are positive affirmations, and just drop those in quite easily. Another way you can deal with this is natural language processing. Under natural language processing comes natural language understanding and natural language generation. You can use frameworks like Synaptic.js. I've had some successes and some failures with this, mainly because if anyone's ever done TensorFlow or machine learning, usually it's about volume training. So sometimes you don't always have the volume required to go through your training with your bot and to strengthen those simulated neural simulated things. Essentially, when you go and do this, you're strengthening links. So something works, you start to strengthen the link between something. When something doesn't work, you go and weaken the link. And you're trying to do this, and usually it requires a huge amount of volume to go and execute. There are a couple of frameworks that will help you do this: Salient, Natural, and Speak Easy. Again, there are some really good blogs out there on this. I've had some success with it. I've had some failures. One thing that was particularly interesting was multilingual users, so having people that work in different languages trying to execute these commands and trying to train the bot, something that I'm still actually working on. I made a monolith. So in your journey for ChatOps, you will reach a certain level of maturity, and then you will find that you are dependent on your bot, and it's huge, and it has everything in there. It has your sales data in there. It has your commands. If you're really going through this journey properly, you have probably moved away from system-level metrics, and you have probably aligned yourself to business metrics. And so you're looking at transactions and conversions and that sort of thing. And so those will probably be going through your bot to go and expose them to more people on the team. And at some point you realize that you've probably created a liability. And so you're going to need to go and break these things out. And so you can go and create multiple bots as a strategy. So you could have the error bot, the sales bot, and start to break those things out and remove those fault domains and make it a little bit smaller, which is quite cool. You also, in the same principle that we're using microservices to make monoliths faster, the same thing, if you want more people working on different parts of the bot, then it's a good thing to go and break them out. We can also go and break them out when we deal with partners. So if you're working with suppliers and other system integrators, build a bot for them, add the commanding, put it in a special room just for them, invite them, and then suddenly we're extending a window into our world almost. So instead of having to think about how do I bring them into my infrastructure, actually we can go and expose the tooling just through ChatOps, and then suddenly we don't need to go through all that overhead of managing their access to something. Now we're fucked. So last year, I'm sure a bunch of you are on AWS. I hope there's no AWS pods here. But when AWS dropped and S3 went down, I think we pretty much saw everybody on the internet was using Amazon at somewhere, I think even Apple. This was a fairly terrible moment. I think that we had bought into ChatOps so much that we thought we felt like it was infallible. It was kind of stupid, really. But it was just one of those things that was always there, and we just thought it would never go anywhere. And when the S3 outage happened, suddenly Chatbot was gone. And people were saying, crap, I can't run this command because I don't actually know how to do it anymore because it's all encapsulated in the bot. And we were working through the source code going, Christ, how do you go and manually execute this command? And it was an interesting moment for us to go and say, we probably need to add redundancy into this. How do we do multi-chat? How do we do multi-bot strategies? Do we need to create a bot of bots that talks to other bots? I'm making things complicated. It's not a viable solution, by the way. Yeah, so there are a bunch of things to do. The real-time socket stuff on Slack has actually been deprecated, so if anyone's still using that, it's not the right way to go. I used to pitch what a great solution this was because it was socket-based, and if you've ever done this stuff in a team for real, it's really cool having multiple members of your team connect in the development environment to the bot and receive a real-time feed from the bot commands in production, and also have the production bot receive those commands. But if you're using the, say, Microsoft Teams or the new version, recommended way of using Slack, which is the Events API, you're going to be over HTTP, which means it's quite hard to go and hook multiple people into that command stream. One thing you can do is if you've just built like something very simple, like an Express-based Node.js app, is to go and hook into Router. I've monkey patched it, which means you can go and register with my bot and say, here is my local ngrok. I register that with the bot, and then it will start forwarding production events onto that, and so the guys in dev get that. Kind of clunky, but I haven't really found a better way of doing this yet. Another demo. So Scale API. I used to have this, I guess, background of Pizza Hut was that it was a design, build, operate, and transfer project outside the enterprise. In doing that, we lost a lot of the enterprise stuff that had evolved around the platform, and so support became suddenly a development task, and we had to go and do this mundane thing of opening and closing Pizza Huts, when something had broken. And so this flow used to look something like this, where eventually somebody from the store would go and send an email to Aubrey, and Aubrey would go and read the email, and we'd go and close the hut because something is not working. I would then go and apply science to the problem, and then I would close the hut. And I thought, man, I'm doing this every night, 3 or 4 times a night, and everything's burning down for one of these huts, and they come back online, and having to manage it was something that felt automatable. I thought, well, I'm going to tackle this. I'm going to go and do something cool with it. So I came back with a new approach. Same thing. So this time I got rid of a few elements, and I added bot intelligence. It's a bot in the cloud. And so the person would go and send the email, except this time the email would get picked up by the bot. The bot would go and process it. It would then go and send it to this thing with the chicken and the hare and the man and the woman and the person in the wheelchair, and actually this is Scale API. Scale looks like it's machine learning. It's actually not. It's machine learning wrapped in people. So you can actually go and do all the machine learning tasks that you normally do, and a person would go and do it for you, which seems counterintuitive, but actually it's quite cool when you need a person to go and check, is that the right thing? Are we doing the right thing? So in our case, it was, is somebody trying to open or close a hut, or is someone trying to open or close delivery? And I wanted to know those buckets of information. And so I sent this stuff to Scale, and then Scale eventually came back with an answer, sent that back to the bot in the cloud, and then we would go and close the hut. Now, this is what it looked like. And this is the really sad thing about ChatOps demos, is that you think it's really cool and you're going to burn a bunch of time when you're talking about it, and then you find out it takes about 10 seconds to go and execute something, and it makes a crap demo. So here's the crap demo. We'll go and send this command to the guys at Scale API. And we'll ask them to close the hut, and then they'll go and do some work on it and say which bucket it was, and they're going to figure out that the hut has been closed. So the payload would come back and they'd say, closing a hut true, and that's pretty much all I wanted to know. Unfortunately, I didn't read the manual when I did this, and it turns out that if you're going to go and do this, that it actually takes 6.5 hours to come back with an answer, so it wasn't really very real time at all. But it costs 20 cents to go and do it. So if you have something that takes 6.5 hours to go and do, and you have the time to burn, then it's a really great way to figure out whether you should be doing something or not. The canary, another cool feature. Again, if you've already aligned yourself to business metrics, and you're looking at your sales and transactions, conversions, and you're no longer caring really about system metrics, then you probably want to go and do something like this. StatsBot is really useful when it comes to signaling that something is wrong with your platform. So we use this just to go and figure out if a particular brand is up or down on a given day by pulling in the stats from GA, and it's really useful because it's going to go and alert to us on a particular channel and say, actually, I think your conversion's off, which is really useful when you've pushed out something like a framework update. Often, if you're working in trunk-based development, and it depends how extreme you are, but if you're working in one environment, it can be a little bit risky when you're pushing out framework updates. This is something that we've used quite a lot to go and figure out. Say on a Tuesday morning, we push an upgrade to React Forms. Suddenly we find out that conversion's off by a few percent, and we start looking into it, and it turns out that Samsung is off, and Samsung devices, once again, are being burnt by this particular version of React Forms. And so this is the thing that goes, hey, because not everybody's always looking at this stuff. Sometimes we'll huddle around this in the morning, and we'll look at these stats and say, are they right? But sometimes we're not looking throughout the day. But generally, we use them to go and change the nature of our day. So when I stand up with my team, we'll look at these, and we'll say, do we need to change focus for the day? Do we need to do something else? Let's talk about how to burn out your team really fast. Again, so when you start to do the error work and you start to go and funnel that through the bot, you're going to add a load to your team. It's already very hard to disconnect from what we do. It's even harder to turn off, I guess, real-time chat when it's constantly there. Email was bad enough. And now when you start to go and load your production errors through your chatbot, it means your phone's constantly going. And while it's quite useful, you will find quickly that one person is constantly watching, and that will drive the rest of the team up to constantly watching, and suddenly the finishing time for the day goes from 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 to midnight, and suddenly your whole team is still online at midnight watching production errors, annotating them, which is really, really unhealthy if you think about it. And having been there, I probably would recommend my previous approach less. I think it's quite useful, but if you can develop hygiene around it to protect your people, it probably would work out. On-call demo. This is the bit we're going to have an issue with, I think. So let's see. When somebody else joined my team, we were putting a new platform live, and one of the challenges was how do we wake people up in the middle of the night to say that something's gone wrong? Yep, sure, you can use PagerDuty, but if you've ever worked in a corporate environment, you'll know how challenging it is to go and get money through a corporate environment, especially into your own team. So I didn't want to do a funding paper. I didn't want to go and ask for money. I wanted to do something really quick. So again, I turned to the bot to do some ephemeral tooling. And this is eventually a CRUD demo. So it would ask you, do you want to register now? You can go and ask it who's on call. It will go and tell you, you can use I'm on call to say that you are pageable. You can say don't call me, and the bot will no longer go and page you. And then you can go and page on call. So it'll call all the people who've registered for the system, and we use Twilio for this. So really, we're just using DynamoDB to hold the data, to register the data, and then we're going to use Twilio to go and reach out. Yep. Let's see if this works. Now, I can't remember which way my screen was. No, hold on. I really want to show you guys this demo. And just as I do it, come on, come on, come on. I feel like we may have closed everything again. Come on, Slack. Okay, so this guy's over here, and this guy goes here, and my terminal's still running. There's a chance this is going to work. So on call. There we go. So on-call menu comes up. I've already registered for the system. It's going to give me those options, those commands. So I'm going to say who's on call. And you can see that I am actually on call because I'm the only person on this. And then we're going to go and do something and say page on call. Now if I've got this right, so
you are on call. Please make yourself known on the platform alerts channel using Microsoft Teams.
there we go. So you'll get that at 3 in the morning when something's burning down. Improvements to the system would be who acknowledged. So I think this is really easy. You can use Twilio to go and figure out who's actually picked up that call. Scheduling, Slack's really useful in doing this. Teams doesn't do this, which is quite annoying. So having moved from Slack to Teams, you can use something in Slack called the ambient command. Ambient's going to go and pick up something that other bots have said, so you can go and do a schedule and say, remind me to say this thing at this time. It will go and do that, so you can actually trigger yourself to be on and off call at particular times just by using the Slack bot. You can't do this in Teams at the moment, which is really painful, so you'd have to go and create a scheduling system of some sorts. And auto page for alerts. So again, I could go and implement that and integrate it into the previous thing that I showed you with the alerts pipeline. I think it would be really terrible. Don't do it. Where do I begin? If you want to go and do this, you need a chat client, a bot, and chat code. Slack is what I'd recommend. BotKit, because I'm a contributor and it's really solid now and works with, I think, 5 or 6 different platforms. I think we're currently working on Google chat integration as well, and then Node.js. But you can do this in Ruby or almost any language you want. It works with HipChat, Facebook, Cisco Spark, Slack, Flowdoc, Skype. BotKit, Lita, and Hubot are your options for bots that are relatively mature in their lifecycle. Good question. Multilingual bots, so again, I spoke about this earlier. Does this work? Is there a way to make it work? It's something that I'm trying to work through. I guess grammar comes up, and ultimately what you're trying to do if you ever use an engine like WIT is to pick out the intents, to pick out the key information and say, this is something, and then try and match that to a particular conversation and execute it. Two other points that I really wanted to put across were to engineer for today's challenges. It's something that I pitch to my teams quite a lot, to try not to make something extensible. I've heard so many people say, you've got to make it modular. But if you think about making something modular, think about the cost it takes to go and do that. Sometimes you don't need something modular. Sometimes it's going to be 20 days before you go and plug something into your modular system. So why make that part of today's development? Try and think about what the current problem is, solve the current problem, and then anything you need to do to extend that or change that or make that extensible actually becomes part of tomorrow's work. And don't forget the PR. Everything we do is PR. We operate in a development space. We don't just operate in operations. So we need to work with developers. We need to make it okay for them to say, I don't know how to do what you do, but I'm okay asking. And developers are always going to be a little bit resistive and a little bit defensive, and so we need to lead the charge on that. So I do some exercises with the dev team, such as mob programming. So I'll sit down in front of the dev team, which is your size, and program in front of them, and I know that those guys do this stuff all day, so they're so much better than me, but I want them to see that I'm fallible. I want them to see that it's okay that I don't know this stuff, and that they know better stuff than me, and I want them to be able to think that I'm approachable so they can come and talk to me about the stuff that we really want to push into the development space. Thanks for having me. Tweet me, tell me if I was shit, tell me if I was really good. Thank you.